I'm Kevin Davis. This is the Catholic Family Podcast, and I'm joined by, well, two people that everyone probably recognizes, two people I'm rather close with. And for a show that has been one of the most requested shows of all time, and that is about the philosophy of raising children with my parents, Dan and Lisa Davis. We are happy for everyone who is going to be here live. We know it's a little late in the US, a little early in Germany, but we're doing our best to get in there and do it live so that everyone can ask the questions of my parents. Before we get going, I'm sure you guys are going to give some sort of caveat and say, you guys are not, you're not experts necessarily. You're experts in that you have raised 10 children and you've had to put it up with people like me. So you've learned, you've had to do a lot, go through the whole ringer of different personalities, etc. But yeah, I guess we wanted to start with kind of just basically discussing what your philosophy of raising children was at the beginning. I guess what it was at the end after raising 10 children. I think about a 20-year age gap. And then we'll take questions from anyone who is watching live, and hopefully we'll have fun while doing it. Connor already joining us, so thank you all for that. And anyone who is watching already, go ahead and comment as we go. We'll try to pick up questions pretty early on. We'll probably do a couple, maybe 10 minutes to kind of let people get in and get situated before they can ask questions and before we start answering them. But we'll start with my parents. You guys can start wherever you want, but I guess the question I would ask again is, the philosophy that you ended up with your 10 children, and you have two sisters, two nuns as daughters. You have a priest, Father Philip, and a brother in the CMRI, Brother Simon. How did it get to that point? I suppose. Where did it begin with? Because you guys were a couple of college students and pretty young raising children.
Yeah, and I'll go. We got a strange situation here with our tech that either this is in and I got a 2 second delay, and so I hear everything I'm saying 2 seconds later, or else I can't hear you at all. So I'll just take this out to talk. But basically, yeah, I think it kind of gets into where I want to start with a little bit of a caveat here is just when it comes to credentials, because neither of us is formally trained in child psychology. Neither of us is trained as parents. Nobody's really trained as parents these days, to tell you the truth. And basically, we're just a couple of people who have been there, who have been through it, who started kind of with nothing. I think maybe we'll start discussing a little bit where we started. But I think that one of the things we've talked about a little bit is we want to make sure as we go through this that we sort of stay in our lane. I know that it's a discussion point, a topic that we don't like to really take on because we don't want to put ourselves out as the experts on things, and especially when we start getting into areas that would be more appropriate for a priest. So I mean, if somebody's got the question, my teenagers dabbling in Satanism, what should I do? Well, the answer is going to be go to your priest. Yeah. So there are a lot of topics on here that I think we're not really the experts in, but I think to a large extent we can kind of talk to a lot of real life. How did we do it? And I think that's one of the things that Lisa and I were talking about a lot last night. That as we go through this, there's not a one size fits all type of an answer to most questions, and a lot of how things are going to work in your family are going to depend on your dynamics, on your personalities, on your relationship, whether you have girls or boys first. And there's so many different things that can dictate your how you do things, that we don't want to pretend like we've got all the answers. But yeah, if you want to start, I don't know if you wanted to start with where kind of how we started with things. And we started from basically not, we did not have Catholic Family Podcast when we were
or anything.
first or married, anything really.
No, you had the 1950s books on parenting, which are in a lot of ways really good resources, but in a lot of ways not at all. I think young parents go to them and they're like, oh my gosh, this is not pertinent anymore, and some is, but a lot is not. And our times are very different and our challenges are very different too. But when we started, I got to tell you, it's honest. This would have been the 1990s mainly when we really
Mhm.
started delving into it, especially when we first got married. Dan converted, what, 2 years after we were
After
married,
yeah, the
and
year
so
right about actually within just a short amount of time before you were
after
born, Kevin.
yeah, right around the time you were born. So dad, it was a learning process anyway, and
Mhm.
I was a cradle Catholic, but I was, we didn't become traditional until I was about 14 years old, and my parents were also in a learning process. So a lot of the parenting techniques that we had to learn, my parents didn't know. I mean, they were converts anyways, so they just didn't know. So I have to tell you the honest truth that when we first started exploring, um, especially homeschooling,
Mhm.
and at first he didn't want to
I
homeschool.
didn't want to homeschool,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, he didn't want to homeschool, but yeah, well,
Well, I came from public
I was,
school and it, worked out great for me. So,
well,
why not do that for
yeah.
our children as well,
Well,
right?
and there really wasn't an available private school, a traditional Catholic school for us at that time. Our Lady of Victory in Aurora, Colorado had closed down, and we lived in Colorado. So there was really no other option. And in my mind, there was absolutely no way we were going to use public school. So it was a no-brainer to me. It didn't take very long for Dad to figure it out. I mean, he as he learned the faith and as he learned and started thinking it through, I think it was a no-brainer.
Mhm.
And I was the one who was going to do it anyway. So
Right.
he didn't care.
Well, and I think one of the oh, go ahead, yeah.
Just real quick, Dad, because I think that's a really important piece. Why was that a no brainer? So I mean, for you, Mom, I guess I could ask you because you guys met in college, right? At DU, so Denver University, and what made that a no brainer? Because I think that's a fairly tough question for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Is education? I mean, if anyone reads, I highly recommend everyone to read the encyclical Sagis Cogitatum by Pope Pius XI, which talks about the importance of education and that the parents have in educating their children. So what made that so obviously that's a big part of your philosophy? What made that so obvious to you that you really did think you could not send your kids to
Yeah.
public school?
For me, my youngest two brothers were already homeschooling. And I had seen firsthand what was already starting to change in the public schools. My mom had sent, when we moved to Colorado and Our Lady of Victory closed down, my youngest two brothers, and especially my youngest brother, I remember specifically, was starting to get. I think the first thing that just absolutely blew my mother away was sight reading. Of all the crazy things that
Mm,
they were expected to memorize all words and weren't taught phonics, and that was the first big red flag for my mom. And then after that, I think that there was a certain amount of just enough change in the culture that my mom and dad were like, "No, we're not gonna go down this road," and took my little brother out. So, that was already a shoe in the door for me for homeschooling. I actually went to college originally to teach school. So, just by what I knew from just going to college, I knew that this was not the atmosphere and the kind of learning that I wanted for my own children. And I wanted my children to be 100%, no question about it, brought up Catholic. And if you are going to public schools, your children are away from you 8 hours a day, being influenced by all kinds of you don't even know what.
mm,
Um, Even if it's a vacuum, you know what happens in a vacuum. So it was just to me, just morally speaking, and I just loved you little buggers.
Mhm.
I wanted to be around you. I mean, isn't that crazy?
Mhm.
That's so not what you're taught anymore, not what young mothers are taught to expect, that you just love these kids and I don't want to didn't want you to leave me all day. I wanted to be the influence. I guess maybe power trip, I don't know. But I wanted to be the influence in my children's young life. And I wanted to mold them in the way that was gonna I don't know, it sounds smarmy, but the way that was gonna save their souls eventually. I wanted them to be
Mhm.
good people. I wanted them to grow up with manners. I wanted them to grow up with, consciences. And if they're going to throw them in the pool with all the baby sharks, the chances were good that you were not going to, it was going to be very hard to come up with a result that's going to bring good people into the world. And I knew that early on. I think just from the experiences I had through my brothers being homeschooled, and by what I had started to glean in the college, you know, wrote that was teaching about education was already, oh my goodness, this is 35 years ago, 40 years ago. It was
Yeah.
already very liberal,
Mhm.
and I didn't even get that far into education before I decided I didn't want to ever have to be a teacher in a public school and jumped courses anyway. But that being the point, I didn't want to be a teacher in a public school. I couldn't conceive of having to deal with that on a daily basis. I had other problems dealing with a bunch of
Mhm.
homeschoolers
That was a lot more work.
from
Yeah, we'll get
infant
into
to,
that. But
yeah, from infant to who knows what. But
but
yeah, that was the original reason for me. Dad
mhm.
dad kind of figured it out.
Yeah, and I think that I would take a little bit of a step back in terms of our discovery process, and I know one of the things we did from day one, and this was really something that I think Lisa brought into our relationship more than I did, is the feeling that as parents, we got to be intentional about this thing.
Mhm.
We've got to think through our major decisions and do them with a purpose in mind. I think at one point you actually, or we sat down together and wrote out a plan for what we want, like a mission statement. I've
Mhm.
heard other parents that will take they'll take a segment from or a passage from the Bible, and it'll kind of be a guiding document for them. Do you want to have a household that is that emphasizes piety, charity, hard work, accomplishment?
Mhm.
There's so many different directions you can go in terms of what you want to emphasize. That we did that to begin with, and I think that was something that we did well from the day one. I think we just kind of fell into it. That when there was an issue of maybe we didn't agree on something, or we were just trying to figure, because I mean we were figuring all this stuff out ourselves. We didn't have the self-help books. We didn't have the conversations like this one. We didn't have the opportunity to ask questions of parents who had gone through it. So we just had each other. And so we would go out and spend, you may remember this, Kevin, we would spend a lot of times on Saturdays and Sundays going out and taking drives and
Mhm.
talking through philosophical issues in terms of what are we doing, what are we trying to accomplish, and how are we going to try to get it done.
Mhm.
And I think that was a key part of really kind of what got us started.
Well, and Dad, I'd be curious. I don't think I've ever actually asked you this, but again, going back a little step, even backwards again, were you always on board with having a big family? I mean, I know you came from a smaller family. Mom was a big family. I mean, it's a pretty personal question, but I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
how long did that take you to really? Yeah, I mean, I guess get on board or get in the same philosophy as mom. Did it take a long time? Did it develop over a long period of time, or was that something that you kind of, there was a light bulb that went off? And it's like, okay, I want to have a big family and I want to raise them Catholic and raise them intentionally. Because I think that's like my favorite word. I just did a podcast with Reverend Mr. Anthony Alley where we talked about the intentionality of
Mhm.
Mhm.
of using your phone or using the internet pretty much, and how everything you should do should be intentional. I think that's maybe the most important word of our time. I mean,
Mhm.
because
Right.
Yeah.
so much of what we do is just kind of willy-nilly, and it's just, we're just spending time thoughtlessly. So intentionality, I think that's a great word. But anyway, yeah. So how long did that take?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kev. And so I would say from the beginning, I was very worldly minded. I mean, when we first met, I mean, I maybe had at least we'll say that I had the seeds of being a Catholic, maybe the heart of a Catholic,
Yeah.
or whatever. But I was very worldly, and I mean, I remember when we were very first married, we lived in Denver, and we would go and take drives through the Denver Country Club and Cherry Hills and places like that. And it was my intent that I was, I got a degree in accounting business, and so got into big accounting firms and all that. And this was very upwardly mobile. And I mean, it was my intent that I was gonna get rich, and we were gonna probably have 2 or 3 children, and we were gonna live in the Denver Country Club, and we are gonna be on top of the world, and all that kind of stuff like that. And so I don't think, you're asking if there was a light bulb moment. I don't think there was.
It was about child number 5 when
It
there was,
I was like, okay, this isn't going anywhere. So
there was no choice. You were there.
well,
You
and I
can't
think
you
that
can't be rich with 10 kids. That's
where it really started to hit, I think, is that in this public accounting world was, basically it was a place where you could rise up the chain, you could become a partner, you could make your $1 million a year, whatever it was going to be. But you were never home. You had to sell your soul to the company.
I think that was a lot of it.
And that was a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably our first major decision point. Was when and this was horrible. It was so often I would be at work on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and it was 5 o'clock, and literally they would say, 5 o'clock, you're not going home. We're staying here till we finish.
Yeah.
And I would call home and say, Lisa, I'm not coming home. When are you coming home? I don't know when I'm coming home. Maybe 7 o'clock. And so I'd call up maybe 8 o'clock. Well, it looks like I'm coming home at 10:30 or 11, or whatever it was. And I mean, that was really, really hard on the dynamics of the family. And that went on for a few months or so. And then we finally decided that, we can't go on like this. So I found another job that was more of an 8 to 5. And I knew that at that point, that any chances of a real big major, because I mean, I was a hotshot coming out of college, in a very distinguished school, and like one of the most sought after, and all that blah, blah, blah. But I think when I took the job with the Aurora Public Schools, which was a second job, and I just knew at that point that the career was not going to be number one. It was family that I was all in on. And at that point, I think we had probably 3 of you guys, and it was starting to become obvious that, and it was about that point too, I got to say that it was around that same point that I had a first fervor in the faith that was really, really, it got doom and gloomy. At least I remembers that one, but it really lit me on fire for Christ and for my faith and everything like that. And so it was probably, I don't think it was an aha moment that, we're going to have a big family. I don't think I ever really thought in those terms, but that aha moment of the faith.
Well, I can tell you what it was, though. I didn't think it was and it wasn't something that happened overnight. But when we started really doing a lot of investigation into homeschooling, we decided on the intentional idea of homeschooling and what were going to be our family themes. And there were 2 right from the beginning, and they stuck pretty much all the way through. I mean, even if it wasn't written down anymore, it was written in our hearts that we were dedicated to the will of God and the holy name of Jesus. And those were the 2 that were very, very strong for us from day one.
Right.
And as soon as you dedicate yourself to the will of God, God says, all right, look out, here I come. And I think that once you do that, then you let God determine your family and your family number and, your family order. And, it becomes sort of the background of all of your thinking is we're going to see what God wants us to do and go from there. And usually there's not a whole lot of planning you can do. He kind of plans that for you, and you say, okay, how do we run with this? And that's when you go out on Saturday afternoon and figure out, all right, how are we going to run with this one? 5, 6, 7, 8 kids later. But
we got a good question up there. Maybe go ahead and start jumping into questions here, Kevin, if you want to.
The HJM one.
Yeah.
It's a question from HJM825. How can I convince my spouse who works remotely to move closer to Mass? We spend 6 to 8 hours traveling to get to Mass. That's crazy.
That's rough.
That's hard.
That's an excellent question. You want to field that one? And I'll
give my answer. How do you convince your spouse? You have to pray. That's number one. You start with God convincing your spouse, because, and then I loved the story. Go back on Feast Day Quick Takes and listen to the story of St. Clotilda and look at St. Clotilda's manner of convincing her husband to become Catholic. It has to be a lot of God, and then you're being very gentle. Don't push it. As soon as you start pushing it, that the male ego jumps right in there.
Yeah.
And it should. I
Right.
mean, he's supposed to be the leader of the family, and that's right and good, and that's how God makes men.
Mhm.
You just quietly talk your talk and gently talk your talk and explain things gently. And, in the meantime, start looking through the realtor.com sites. and if you find a really good house, ooh, look at this one. And then it's hard to really counsel someone when you don't know the whole situation.
Right.
But number one, you have to pray and pray hard. And no, don't just pray. God listens to sacrifices. If you show him how serious you are by giving something up, I gave up coffee for a year to get the house we're living in now. Well, the house over there.
Next to
That house. No,
Yeah.
that
That
house.
you got to look point the wrong way. That's right.
Yeah. And it's a thing. You'll hear stories about it, but it really is true. Join sacrifices to your prayers. God knows you're serious, and he may not give you exactly what you think you want, but he's going to give you what is best for you.
And the will to do it.
You're
And
right.
it's important to point out here, like Lisa's saying, that in a lot of families, but I'd say most families, in any given 100 decisions that you make, the husband makes 2, the wife makes 98 of them, but the husband
But we just kind of
makes
slide it in there.
the most important too.
No.
Right. And it's where are you going to live, where are you going to work, how are you going to make a living, how are you going to provide for the family, all those kind of things. And you do need to try to be collaborative about it. But for the most part, bottom line is it's the father's decision to make. And I'll tell you a story that I don't remember who it was. This might be Bill Meese, God bless his soul, God rest his soul, that told the story about Father Dennis Chicoine. He had a family that was coming in and asking. The father was having problems with his family, and Father Dennis just said, "Are you praying the rosary?" And the guy said, "No." He said, "Go pray the rosary and then come back to me." And I mean, that was kind of harsh. Father Dennis was a Marine, but former Marine. But I think that's what I would say, to build on what Lisa's saying. If you are not praying the daily rosary with the family, you pray the daily rosary, and I'm telling you, our Blessed Mother, I mean, obviously anything she asks for from God, she gets. But I think even more importantly, she has the sensibilities and the heart of a mother, and is going to help to put his heart in the right place to make good decisions.
Right. And this is a matter of heart too.
Mhm.
It's when you're talking about faith, it very often is the mother that leads faith decisions. Not always,
It
obviously.
typically is. Yeah.
But I think that that's natural too. We're with the children all day. I mean, we are looking at the detail, and we're looking at hearts, and we're looking at souls in a different way. Not that guys don't, of course they do.
Mhm.
But I think that we're going to see the minutia and the detail a little bit better sometimes than men do.
Oh, yeah.
And you can't hit them over the head with that.
Right.
It's just simply true. So you have to be sly about how you
Mhm.
approach it with them in a way that doesn't sound like you're trying to be the boss, because you're not. They are, in the big decisions, they are the boss. But you have to figure out how you're going to influence them, and influence their hearts in a way that isn't somehow going to demean them, if that makes any sense. But yeah, sometimes you really do pray your rosary.
Mhm.
Yeah, ask the Blessed Mother how to figure it out. She already knows. She already knows. So it's just a matter of listening and figuring out what she wants you to do.
Yeah. But the importance of that decision, we can't, stress enough that
Being close to Mass is
being close
big.
to Mass is huge.
Yeah.
And we went through a number of very difficult years, because we had made the decision at one point that Western Colorado was where we felt was the best place to raise our children. And as it turns out now, just looking at its hindsight, we had the most unbelievable rock star team of religious up there, Reverend
Oh my
Mother,
goodness.
who
Father Anaya.
Father Anaya, Sister Kazimira,
No, just so many.
just so many that were Sister Petra, I think, was up there
For a little while.
for a little
Right
while,
at the end.
and that was where we
Yeah.
felt like we needed to be. Well, that was heck
was-
on me as career wise, and there was just no work up there, and it kind
No.
of kicked off a number of years where we went here to there. We went from Western Colorado back to Eastern, back to Western, and then we basically ran out of money because
No,
of,
it was
we had to
hard.
move to Las Vegas for a time. But even there, we moved because we had Father Career in Las Vegas, and then
Mhm.
we moved to Omaha after that. But even when we were looking for jobs in Omaha,
Yep.
we basically had narrowed down to we were going to look at Denver, we're going to look at Colorado Springs, we're going to look at Idaho, Spokane, and Omaha, and that was basically the only place because we made it a necessity that wherever I worked, it was going to have to be close to work. And I suffered in terms of the opportunities that I'm sure I lost career wise. And, my career
It
has
was-
not amounted to much when it comes down to it, but God's always made sure that we feed the family.
Yeah.
So next question, and I would love for people to get involved in the comment sections, and I mean, like, I'm going to have a question later on about how do you handle a 3-year-old boy who has some issues with needing to do things with his hands and throw balls and stuff. So I mean, like, really practical questions are totally fine, guys. That's actually more of what I'm even looking for. But I'll ask a question that I've had people even ask me. And I know, so you guys have already said intentionality is one of the biggest things, and I think that's a great word. Homeschooling. So I think that the idea again of you being in control of what your children are doing during the day. Friends, I know, is a big one. But I'll ask how do you end up with 4 religious out of 10 children? And I think that's a question everyone kind of like, how does this happen? And there have been other families where it's happened, obviously. But you guys are here, so we're going to ask you. So how do you get that? How do you get it so that there is not just everyone stays in the faith so far, thanks be to God, but that you have religious who truly, go and give their lives to God. So what do you think are the key factors of raising children who will eventually become sisters or priests or brothers?
Yeah, we talk about that quite a bit. And let me give my answer real quick, and then because mine's kind of short, I think. But what I would say is that we talk about the concept of peer dependency. That you put children into schools, especially put them in. They have bad friends. There's so many different things that can happen that their self-image ends up being based on the what their peers think of them, and they're never going to achieve very high. They're always going to be brought down by that, and they're going to kind of work towards the lowest common denominator. And we always try to make sure that all of you guys ultimately looked at God as being the standard by which you were trying. So I mean, you're trying to please mom and dad, but we were just basically agents of God ultimately, and we wanted to make sure that He was the standard by which you judged yourself. And by doing that, I think you could, just develop better spiritually.
Yeah. I think too, it's a really big picture. If you think about the world, you think about raising your children as a teeter-totter. I was thinking about this last night, and you've got the world, you've got the 2 sides of a teeter-totter. One side, the world is weighing in on, okay? You're on the other side. How do you keep the world from gaining control of your child? Because as soon as the world has them, it's over. I mean, they can come back, and then we have many saint stories where they do. But you have to figure out a way that makes your family life, your faith, goodness, just simple goodness, more attractive than what the world is trying to offer. And there's a lot of things that go into that. One of them is, oh my goodness, I cannot stress enough what you allow your children to read, what you allow your children to watch on television, the friends that you do have to help, especially in the early days, choose your children's friends for them. And as you're doing that, you're teaching them and in your daily conversations, and there should be a lot of daily conversations. That's something that's really important too. In your daily conversations, how important it is to choose good friends, and what's a good friend and what's not a good friend. And these are things that you talk about. And so that, okay, so you get the whole friend idea over here in your Catholic box on this side of the teeter-totter. So they've got good friends. I cannot stress how important that is. You make sure that their reading is wonderful, wholesome reading, and that they can enjoy literature. They can enjoy the best of literature, and the best of literature is usually wholesome literature. Read G.K. Chesterton. Read Lucy Maud Montgomery. Read. There's so many good things that your children can read. There are actually a lot of good movies and series that are perfectly okay. You teach your children how to balance how much that you don't want them to become, video files, or, the kids that are stuck on their phones. Don't give them a phone.
Yeah.
Our rule is they don't get a phone until they can pay for it themselves. So, by that time, God willing, you've already trained them well enough. But all of these things, if you've got in your side of the teeter-totter, you've got the wholesome movies that have helped form their character, the wholesome books that have helped form their character, so that if they pick up a bad book, they don't get very far into it without saying, "Ew, this is yucky." And you talk about that. You let them know there are bad books out there, and this is why they're bad, and this is why I don't want you to pollute your mind with them. If you pollute your mind with the thing, it's in your brain forever until you die. It's in there, and you don't want to do that. Just don't even start there. And I told my children that when they were 5 years old, so that this is why we don't read these books. This is why we don't do Harry Potter. And boy, I still argue with people about that. We don't do Harry Potter. Never did. There are so many things like that are weighing your side of the teeter-totter. One of the big things that was really important to me early on was to have parties. Like, we celebrate the feast days like feasts. So we would decorate up for Saint Therese. We would decorate up for all of the feast days. We have statues and shrines, and we decorate them, and make a big deal out of it. And the children decorate, and then food. Food's big, people. You want to have good and traditional. Like, there are certain things that we have every year on feast days that are just a big deal. You don't have them any other time. You have them on the Feast of St. Patrick. You have bread pudding with condensed milk poured over the top. It is a big deal. You look forward to St. Patrick's Day because this is what
corned beef and cabbage.
Corned beef and cabbage and cold cannon, not just cabbage. And these are things that you look forward to, and it's a big deal, and it's a tradition. And tradition is so important. Not just Catholic tradition. Catholic tradition obviously is important, but your family traditions. You want your children to grow up and can't even imagine not celebrating in these ways. Like, why on earth wouldn't you do that? This is where all your warm, fuzzy feelings come from.
Yeah. It's a harsh reality that your children are going to hit 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, and they got to make a decision. Do I want my adulthood to be like my childhood or not?
Or do I want
were my parents heroes, or they anti-heroes?
Yeah.
Do I want to emulate them, or do I want to do the opposite of them?
It doesn't even have to be. It doesn't even have to be emulating you and Dad, though obviously you want them to.
Right.
But it's really it's a family thing. You want them to, your family and your faith are almost.
So we say joyful associations is what the term we like to use, is that you want to make sure you have joyful associations with the faith. And so when they get into adulthood, they want those joyful associations. Now they're going to make their own traditions, which is fine. Which they should.
Yeah.
But the heart of what you taught them and what you developed in them is what you're trying to get them to do when they grow up.
Right. They wouldn't want to rebel against it. Why would you do that? This is where all the happiness comes from. Why would you do that? And you don't want to disappoint your family, because you're close to your family. And then there's a lot of ways to, have family closeness. Homeschooling is a big one. Though, don't mean to downgrade our good traditional Catholic schools. They're wonderful. And we've used
them. Yeah. So we don't down talk those.
We don't ever. And they're wonderful. But at the same time, when you're using the traditional Catholic schools, you should also be working very, very hard to keep your own family culture healthy. so that you're doing things together that are related to the faith and other things. Not everything has to be Catholic, but even so, it actually is, if I think about it.
Mhm.
You go to the zoo, you say your travel prayers on the way to the zoo. When you're at the zoo, you talk about, golly Moses, can you imagine Noah fitting all these animals just in the zoo in the ark? I mean,
But you
bring
sit
the
down
faith
for
into
lunch
everything.
and you pray, you do sign the cross and you pray the blessing before meals. And I mean, it's a powerful outreach. It's a
Yeah.
powerful message to the children. It means a lot. But it's these little things. The church is so wise in giving these little tools, but they mean so much in the development of children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
So
So intentionality, joyful associations with the faith. I think
Yeah.
those are good good tips, and they're nice because there's something you can absolutely use as a bedrock kind of to build on. And I think I remember that from my childhood that's really true. There was a lot of what we did. I mean, one of the ones that always comes to mind, it was during Lent. Of course, we'd have no TV or anything, and so on Sundays we'd watch the show All Creatures Great and Small. We'd have popcorn and cheese and summer sausage, and it was a big deal, and it was something that we associated with the faith because it was on Sundays during Lent. So you had the suffering, and then you had that really nice family thing. We did that for years,
Yeah.
part of the
and it was
midnight blowouts,
the
or did those come later?
Those were
those
with
came
our
a bit later.
teenagers.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was a part of maybe the beginning of those. I was there, I think, where it was like, yeah, you started to get pretty crazy sitting up till midnight. That was more my sisters. My sisters, even though one of them or two of them are nuns, they're pretty they're the party animals. These girls.
Crazy.
I hear that they still have that in them. They may go out and play on playgrounds in the middle of the night. Just a rumor that I have heard from somebody. Well, let's get into another question here. This is a very near and dear to my heart. This question again. Everyone else who's watching, please send in your questions if you have any for my parents. We'll probably go another 30 minutes or so. So get them in now if you'd like to hear from my parents. Also, let us know if you like this show. Maybe we'll try to do it again sometime. Maybe we'll try to do a different time. We'll have to figure that. The timing is pretty tough to try.
It's
to
kind of tough for people, yeah.
As we can, but we'll see. Maybe even a Friday afternoon might work better. But let's figure that out. So this is Mama of 3. She says, "I would love some tips for raising choleric boys." Me too.
Mhm.
And any ideas on how to help little ones deal with lots of emotions? That is a fantastic question, and one I would love an answer to.
Because you're kind of dealing with that yourself.
Oh, pretty much exactly that. Yeah.
Well, and we did. We had two.
We have a few cholerics.
We have
in our
several
family.
cholerics, and at least 2 among the boys, if not 3. So, and you pretty well mastered it.
No, you can't master it. That I think one of the most important things that we did that helped us tremendously with our choleric boys was move out onto the farm.
Yeah.
You don't have to move out onto a farm. Cholerics, it's very, very important, and especially girls too. But boys need to have a domain of their own. Cholerics naturally want to be leaders. And what makes them so difficult is it's sometimes they're trying to be your leader, and sometimes all the time they're trying to boss around all their brothers and sisters, and this doesn't wash very well. If you give them some job, task, even a hobby. For us, it was moving out to the farm and giving our number 1 choleric boy a job. I mean, he took care of
He
the
basically
animals.
ran the farm.
He ran the farm, and he was like
It was like
10,
he was 10 or
years
11.
old,
Yeah.
and he just mastered it. And not everyone's going to want to do that, but if you can find something for these little cholerics and their own thing, not all the same thing, because you can see what that would cause, but give them something to do. Boys especially need something to do, and the more physical, the better. Let's see, we had 4 boys out on the farm, and we won't talk about Kevin's role in that. But
Hey,
but
I did somewhere.
you did, yeah. We won't, yeah. And it was not even so much important for you as it was for your brother, because he needed to be in charge of something, and something that he could excel at. This is really, really important for little cholerics. as far as emotions, oh my goodness.
Well, one thing I think that just comes to mind right off with emotions is that you have a little one that has a temper
Mhm.
tantrum, and a temper tantrum from a sanguine, phlegmatic, melancholic, choleric can mean very different things.
Mhm.
And I think so. I mean, I would say number one, just understanding that your boy is a choleric, it puts you ahead of the game. Just because you understand that you're dealing with somebody who's got a different personality than the other personality types.
Mhm. Well, and a choleric very often is going to lose it when they are not in control of something they feel like they should be in control of. The problem being that mom needs to be in control whether they like it or not. This is just a battle you have to win. You can't let them be the boss. You can't let them control the family. And is this easy? No. A lot of them are just going to rail at you until they finally give up, and sometimes it takes a while to give up, but you cannot let them win. If they once they are ruling the house, your house is going to be chaos. Once
Yeah.
they're and it's not good for anybody spiritually or otherwise. I mean, it's a mess.
But a choleric who understands their place
And that's key.
in the hierarchy is usually extremely good.
Once they figure it out.
Right.
And you know what? Don't be afraid to sit down and talk to them about it.
Mhm.
Cholerics are almost always extremely intelligent. I mean, they're bright. You can sit down and talk with, and don't, you're not talking like their friend. You're talking like the boss, and you're saying, okay, this is what we see. This is what we consider the difficulties, and you have to understand that this is the way the hierarchy works in this home. Give them if they like war movies, talk to them in relationship to generals and privates. If they like dinosaurs, talk about them in relationship to what's the bad one? To Tyrannosaurus Rexes and whatever falls underneath Tyrannosaurus Rex. Talk to them in a way that they can understand. But it is simply true that you must be in control of the house. You can't be you can't let them rule. As soon as they do, it's chaos.
Right.
Yeah, ask us how we know.
And just from my own perspective, I've got a 3-year-old who's the choleric, and how do you do that? Because I think I was literally just last night talking to Ina about that, exactly how he needs to have something to do. He could go. It's like I was actually, funny enough, in that way. He could throw a ball all day long. Like, he's happy if he's throwing a ball. So how do you,
Mhm.
our daughter? So she's 5 and she's much more melancholic. She's much more studious. We're just going to give her schoolwork and she'll be really happy. She likes that. She likes doing that. She likes doing school.
Mhm.
But then when she's doing school, you have your little energetic 3-year-old choleric. How do you? Because mom, you homeschooled. I don't know if you ever did 10 at a time, but maybe you did
No,
7 or
not
8
that
at a
many.
time. How did you? How do you juggle that as a homeschooler, or not? I mean, let's say, even if they're going to school, how do you keep each individual one occupied, I
Yeah,
suppose?
Mhm.
that's a question for the ages. And different phases in our life, we did different things too. Um, when some of you were old enough, it depends on what your age ranges of children are. When we had children old enough to sort of take over younger children, that's what we did. And we had some children who were especially good at it. Like, I could just tell Sister Antonia, here, go read with William. And she would take over reading with William. And then she would have her own free time later on to do what she needed. You can't think, especially if you're homeschooling, you can't think of school like conventional schooling. Your time works differently.
Different, yeah.
And it should. That's the beauty of it. If you can't use all of the perks of homeschooling, why homeschool? Like, for instance, there were times when the girls would do their things in the afternoon and the little boys would do their things in the morning. If you can find and sometimes, good grief, especially if you've got a needy 2 or 3-year-old. Infants are actually not that hard. You know what to
Yeah.
do with an infant. But a 2 or 3-year-old who is active and making noise and sometimes purposely trying to disrupt and get up on your lap, okay, that's the hard one. The best thing that we could do in those times was just juggle things in a way that when we had a nap time for 2-year-old, 3-year-old, this is when we hit the gravy. This is when we did actual phonics with the first grader. High schoolers, by the time they're in high school, should be able to, or even earlier than that, probably by the time you're 12 years old, you can self-direct most of your learning. And mom comes in and helps when necessary, but a lot of it
unless you're
they
me.
self-learn. What's that?
Unless you're me, and then you need to be sent to a boarding school in order,
Right.
because I
In
wouldn't
which case it's
self-direct.
like,
So yeah,
take them,
yeah. Bye. Bye,
Father.
Ken.
They're yours. But that wasn't until you were 14.
True.
And then we had the youngest two, brother Simon and William, until I guess
Eighth grade?
until 8th, 9th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that too. So they were actually even earlier.
Yeah, he's 12. I think William was 12.
Yeah,
I think.
William was
It
really
crazy.
young.
Yeah.
He was 7th grade.
By the way, there's a
8th grade.
conversation going on in the chat here. This is our house.
Yeah.
It's up against a green screen though. We're up. Yeah,
I can't point at.
you can see a couple wrinkles back.
Must
back
be a
there in
good
the
green
corner.
screen though, because yeah,
That's a green
exactly.
screen.
People are full. That's a good thing. No, that is good. It's interesting. I mean, I think we could talk forever about how you raise each personality. We actually did a show about that way back when. I mean, like 3 years ago now. Couple of shows. I don't know. I probably won't remember to link them, but go back to the very beginning of the videos, like what 2,500 videos later, something like that, and you'll find these podcasts that are some of the first 50 for sure. But we can also do again if people like this, we could do more and talk about not just necessarily just cholerics. We can talk about phlegmatics, like me. So I mean, again, we all have our own faults and failures, not just cholerics, even though they're the ones that
they're more nauseous about it.
They're in your face, like oh my gosh, please, But
in a way, it's good because to solve the problem.
Yeah,
the phlegmatics just take their faults and
just
hide away with them.
Yeah,
exactly. Go up and read in their room while they should be working on the farm. Not naming names or anything. Okay, let's go to the next question. Connor had a good question here, and this is a really good one. How did you raise a family on one income? It seems super difficult these days. I would
always
been. Agree with that.
It's been our whole life difficult.
But I'll tell you what. I mean, that's a hard one for me to answer fairly, Connor, because I mean, I had kind of the little bit of a silver spoon to the point of being able to go to a distinguished college and getting a good degree and then getting out in the world and being able to make a better salary than most. But I mean, about the best I can really recommend is try to stay out of debt. We didn't do a real good job of that. Just try to stay out of debt the best you can. And you're going to live small, you're going to live hand to mouth. And I think that there is I can't quote it right, but Charles Dickens nails this right. He says, basically income $20, outflow $20.01, result misery. Income $20, outflow $19.99, result happiness. And I think that to the extent that that's probably my number one overall. And I say this as somebody who didn't do a particularly good job of that. But the other part of it is in all of my studies, 1973 is actually the year when a regular single salary provided best for a family. You see pictures in 1973 of men working they're working at 7-Eleven as a cashier and probably working full time, and they were supporting a family on that. Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, it's almost hard to fathom that now. And all I can say is it's very difficult. It's gotten worse. I mean, we're living right now in this, the property you see here. We've got two incomes on this. Now we got two families, but we got two incomes on the property, and they're both fairly decent. And we're still struggling to get by. So I mean, we pray for better times and all that. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of really good, easy, quick answers to it. It's going to be a slog. It's going to be rough. You have to hope that you and your wife, take that for richer, for poorer. The oath that you make to each other, you take it seriously, because probably in these days, God willing, it's worth it. I mean, it is worth it to do it, but it's hard.
And don't let it get you down.
Right.
and though I can't say I never let it get me down. But another thing too, marry a thrifty woman. Um, it's I don't think I owned a new outfit of clothing until the last 10 years.
Right.
We yeah, and there's no shame in that. We shop the thrift stores. Our furniture, I don't think we had new furniture until we were like, grandparents. And who cares? It
Right.
doesn't matter. And there's an awful lot of ways that you can make a lot out of a little. And that's what a good wife these days does. And all of my friends do. We just figure out how to make that dollar stretch as far as we possibly can. And it's a lot of prioritizing. Most of our lives, we didn't go on fancy vacations at all, ever. I mean, we didn't. A big night out was Taco Bell.
Yeah.
When you boys were little. It is what it is, and you make the most of it. And then that's part of how you survive this, is that you don't let it get you down. You just accept that this is the way it is, and you can have fun with it. You can figure out how to do fun things with very little money, and don't let the children think that, oh, woe is me, we're poor.
You'll look back at those poorest days as being some of your happiest.
They actually are.
It's ironic, I think, but I think we look back now, and they were hard, but we look back at them now at some of those poor days, and it's like, yeah, they were happy days.
It's simpler.
Yeah.
A different, maybe more simple for me than you. You were worrying.
Well, I've made it, over the course of years, I've made a couple of small fortunes and then just lost them again. And it was great when we were on the top, but Lisa and I started getting each other's throats, and then the money goes away, and I can't sleep at night, and I'm up at 4 a.m. every morning and just stressed out. And then eventually the money's kind of completely gone, and there's a certain relief in it, almost, because you're just struggling to get by, paycheck to paycheck. You're struggling. You're not necessarily struggling to eat, but you're struggling just to get by. And there's something kind of freeing in that. Something.
It helps you stay centered better. I think. You know what it says in the Bible, of course. It's harder for a rich man to make it to heaven than it is to get through the eye of a needle. And there's a reason that our Lord says that. It's very easy to get your head turned when you have a lot of money. You lose your perspective. You can also lose your perspective when you're poor. Yeah.
Especially if you want money too much. I mean, that's another form of riches, really.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And and speaking from my own perspective, I think some of it too is right. The ability to think humbly, I suppose, but also be willing to go and live with your parents or your in-laws. I mean, look at you guys do it with one of my brothers. I do it with my wife's family, and it can be hard. It has its own challenges, but it also has advantages. And I think that the generations before us, also lived in one family home, and they dealt with the issues that brought. And that was just that the generation that came before had the homestead, then they supported the rest. And then the younger generation supported them as they got old and died. Right. And I think that there was a much better family community than there is now. Now it's like, okay, you're 18, you leave the house, you never go back. And then the parents go into the old folks home, excuse me. And I think that I'm not saying that every situation you have to live together, obviously, but I mean, I think there should be a little more thought of that could be possible. Maybe we should be generationally supportive of each other rather than just like, okay, I'm 18, see you guys. We'll see you on 4th of July. And that just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, it's an American problem, I think. I don't know, because I mean, it does seem like in Europe things move more slowly, and your towns evolve and buildings are built slower. And in America, it is all about going out and having the American dream and building your house and moving from here and moving away and getting away. And I agree, Kevin. I don't think it's healthy. No.
Well, so let me give you an example. So my daughter-in-law, who lives across the way over there, had to leave this morning because her sister had a baby, and she was going to go over and help for a little while. So the children, they have 4 children. 3 of them came over here with me, and we hung out, which was absolutely fabulous. I mean, I was able to help her. She was able to help her sister. It was a win-win in every way. And then little later when she came over and she was picking up the kids, we chatted for a while, and she said, well, I really do appreciate it, and I hate to be a burden kind of a conversation. And it's like, no, 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 are you kidding? When you get to be our age, especially when you're, I'm not decrepit yet, um is but I'm also not, my job is here on the property. Being in touch with the children is huge. I mean, it is my life. And there's a phrase that I was trying to think of when I was talking to her. It's called touching grass. I read that, and somebody was talking about touching grass, and that phrase meaning
Earthing.
staying,
Yeah.
no, not just in a physical way,
Oh,
but in a metaphysical
okay,
way,
right.
and in a philosophical way. If you're a grandma and what are you doing? You're not raising your children anymore. And you're just living in an apartment. Maybe you have a job or a part-time job, and you are 100% self-centered.
Hmm.
Anything that you can do in your life, no, no matter how hard it is, to prevent becoming self-centered and you being the center of the whole universe, you have to do it. I mean, if you want to save your soul, then that's what you have to do. You don't want to be self-centered. If I were living on my own somewhere and didn't have these little children coming over here all day long, knocking on my door, showing me this and that and the other thing, and being available, being help. So it helps them, but it also is very, very important for me to be able to help. I mean, for as long as I can, until I'm 90 years old, hopefully, I'll be able to still be a functioning member of the family and still able to help.
Well, yeah, and it totally makes sense. And again, just that generational value that you have. You've learned, you've gained wisdom, you've gained from experience, from failure, and you can help with the grandchildren and with the children still, right? And
Yeah.
giving advice, being there, as you said, just there to be available. And it makes so much sense that I think it just seems like it's so, again, easily, especially I think especially in the US, it's just, you see each other
Yeah.
during the holidays, you visit each other, but you don't really have that actual family togetherness. And I think it's a waste. I think it
Yeah.
truly
Mhm.
it's just okay, well, they're, grandma's wisdom and grandma's, ability to help with the children, and grandpa too, obviously, you know you you just don't, you're not using the talents that you have. And what the things that, that my wife's parents can do here, are things that that they I don't know, that they're just a different function almost.
Mhm.
Grandma can help
Mhm.
her help my kids learn how to bake and how to sew and she's teaching the Sophia how to weave. That is these
Oh, wow.
different skills. Grandpa's fixing everything, and and helping, and giving his little tips and little kicks in the butt sometimes. And I think that's, again, it's such an important thing that I think we need to not just poo-poo, not just like, oh, I could never live with my in-laws. And again, it does have its challenges. Of course it
Oh,
does. You're
sure.
Oh, yeah.
you're you're
Oh,
you're
sure.
trying to work together with a whole nother group of people or a couple of people, and that it is not always easy. That's for sure. But it should not just be shot down immediately. All right, let's move on to the next question. This is a tough one. I don't know how you guys want to answer this one. From Rainbow Kramer. Any advice for a single or widowed mother on raising good traditional Catholic sons, especially?
Ah.
Mm.
Well, I think what we said before, watch their friend group. That
Yeah,
that that
that's
we've seen more young men and young women actually lost by their friend group,
mhm.
their influence of the friend group and the internet, than just about anything else. Even things that you think are going to be perfectly innocuous, like getting them involved in, and I know this is going to be controversial, getting them involved in sports. They
Yeah,
make a
unfortunately,
friend
they
group
make a friend group that have different
that's
priorities
and different
and
values,
worldly priorities.
and they
Yeah.
want to be cool. They want to be cool in their friend group.
Mhm.
So I mean, back in the olden days, and we tried to get this started as much anywhere we went. You have afternoon volleyball. You have baseball games. You find ways to get all of your Catholic children together as much as possible, and make sure that their good, lasting friendships are with other good Catholic children and families. And does this always? Sometimes this backfires. Sometimes, let's be real. This is the world. You might have a great friend as a kid, and then they grow up and they're not such a great friend. Well, it is what it is. You just pray really hard and you talk about it. And then this is one of the things that I think it should it I think it's taken for granted maybe, or it's just not talked about, the fact that you got to talk about it.
Mhm.
You should be discussing these things with your children, whether they're in the traditional Catholic schools or whether they're home taught. Bring this stuff up. Talk about it all the time. Let them weigh in. Let it be a two-sided conversation and discuss why are these things important? Why is it important to have good friends? What do you think is causing so many young boys to leave the faith? Ask them, see what they say, and let that start a good conversation that you can pull back around to, see how unhappy so many of them end up being, that they end up on drugs and in jail and all kinds of terrible things. They end up losing their whole family. And there's so much misery out there. Holy moly. And talk about it with your kids. I mean,
Mhm.
it sounds kind of rough, but
Well,
it's the world.
and I want to put a comment that says, no disrespect, obviously, but women can't raise men. Sons would need good, strong, masculine
Oh,
mentors. And this
true.
is really true.
This is
Very, very
true.
good point.
Yeah.
And now the question is, obviously, if you're single mother, whatever it is, you're not going to have the father in place, and
Go find
but
somebody.
you're going to have to find somebody.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, and Kevin, you could probably talk to this if you want to. Boys camp, okay, over the summer, boys
Yeah.
camp, and they get introduced to priests, they get introduced to other Catholic boys,
Yeah.
and they need that male influence. And if you
Yeah.
have to send them off to a boarding school or something like that when they get to be early teenagers or whatever it is, that's an extremely important point.
No, we found that out too, especially a mom battling with choleric boys.
Right.
You have to be the boss, and if you just can't do it, you better send them to a school with a strong male mentor.
And
which-
Lisa was the choleric of the two of us, and we literally got with all of you guys. And I think, Kevin, you were probably the least problematic, but all of you guys got to about 13 or 14 years old, and the house wasn't
was
big
like-
enough. The house wasn't big enough for you and mom. And it was just, that's a teenage boy thing. I mean,
it's normal.
it's normal. It's natural. There's nothing wrong with it.
No, it's
But
normal.
I think you do have to find, for me growing up, I actually had, my dad was a good, kind of a workaholic, but I mean, he was a good moral dad, not Christian, but good moral dad. But I had a baseball coach when I was in high school who was character former,
Yeah.
butt kicker. And he really formed my character,
Mhm.
and he kicked my tail end at a time in my life when I really needed it.
Yeah.
And so, our other choleric boy, Dominic, had that with Father Anaya, a very formational time where Father Anaya was just really
It was exactly what he needed.
exactly what he needed.
Well,
Yeah,
and that's
really
something
tough.
that's something that needs to be brought out too. That you can have the most wonderful dad in the whole wide world, but having an outside mentor
Yeah.
is
Is extremely important.
Oh yeah, because for one thing, a young man needs to see that his parents aren't just crazy.
Right.
Mm.
that there's somebody else out there that they can respect and think is pretty cool, who is also Catholic, that can be a mentor, can be a quasi father figure to them. And I think that actually adds to what their dad is. And if you don't have a husband at home, I think it's really important to find that father figure somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, Mom. And I can speak to that too, that I mean, it really helped me. I changed a lot when I went to Omaha to boarding school. Now, boarding school is not for everyone, and not
Mhm.
every group works. And that's a tough topic that I know it's hard to always recommend, because it's not always.
It's not going
It
to be for
doesn't
everybody.
always work.
The group
Yeah.
of boys is not always great. It's not always great
Yeah.
for and I would say, especially for girls, I don't know, just my opinion.
Omaha's
But
kind of hit and miss. Yeah.
it is.
Well,
It
everywhere
is.
it
And
is.
it depends. A lot of it just depends on the group, and a lot of. So I'm sorry, but sometimes parents send their children there as a reform school, which
Yep.
is not
Mhm.
what it should be. Should not be a
Right.
military reform school. But I did absolutely get that. I got out there, and within weeks, I had my my new father figures, like literally, were priests and seminarians, and they became not just my father figures, but like good friends. So they
Yeah.
were my
Mhm.
mentors but I was really good friends with him. This is Father Heine, who's now my
Yeah.
priest, ironically.
Yeah.
Father Gronenthal, and they were not even priests at the time; they were seminarians, and they became the most important men in my life. At the
Mhm.
time, and of course, Dad too. But I was a long way away. I was 8 hours away.
Right.
So, and that was hugely forming for me. That I was like, wow, okay. As you said, these are other men who, they're pretty cool,
Yeah.
and they're really holy, and they can have fun, but then they go and pray for a couple hours every day, and
Mhm.
that was a huge experience for me, and I think, but also growing up with Father Barry, who
Yeah.
also had his own interpersonal issues, but just being able to spend time with a priest, and I think if you're in a parish, which I know not everyone is, but if you have a local priest, I would certainly say, hey, Father, can my boy serve? Can you call us if you have funerals or weddings, or do you need your lawn mowed or
Mhm.
whatever? And just my last comment on this topic, because this is something that I think is another one of the greatest issues of our time, is that the older generation of men, so let's say maybe 30 plus, 35 plus, so around my age and over, absolutely need to be, first of all, good examples, but secondly, need to be mentors. Find a young guy who needs a little bit of a arm around his shoulder, and be that example, and because I just think it
Mhm.
seems like the older male generation just kind of went, nah, and especially the boomers. Sorry, boomers. I'm not saying everybody, but especially the boomers. Just like, it's not my problem. I'm just not going to do it. And I
Mhm.
And
think
Gen X, that's
in the Gen X,
generation.
just like,
They're not real
I'm
good
just,
either. Yeah.
No.
not my
No.
thing. I'm just not going to do it. And I think that's a shame. And I think that's
Well,
something that,
it wasn't an expectation. I mean, and I think for generations, it hasn't been an expectation.
Mhm.
There are a lot of things that we have to make expectations in our children. For instance, how our sons treat women. How are you taught to be a knight in shining armor? Are you taught to be, rude and bitter towards women?
Mhm.
It's how that's going to affect you your whole entire life, and your relationships with other people. If your relationship with women is unhappy and demeaning, you are not going to have a very happy life. And now, does
Mhm.
that mean that women should be in control of your household? Absolutely not. Does that mean that we think we're better than you? Absolutely not. But if you aren't taught courtesy as a young boy, then you're going to have a lot of troubles growing up. I
Mhm.
mean, there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things that are going to influence young men that have to be taught starting at age 2.
Yeah. We've got a men's group in Omaha, and a couple of years ago, I don't know why we haven't done this since. We also have a boarding school in Omaha, and we just had a career day, and all the men,
mm,
probably half dozen of us or so, showed up and talked about what we did for a living, and
Oh
and
yeah, that
this
was so
and
good.
this
Yeah,
conversation,
awesome.
it was life changing
for
for
some of
two
those
or three
kids.
or four of the different boys, and
Yeah.
they went from being kind of aimless to having an aim in their life. And I don't remember if they went off the military or what they ended up doing, but became an electrician or something. But it was very meaningful. And to your point, Kevin, that if there are any men out there that are, between Kevin's age and my age, that absolutely we should be figuring out a way to stand before the young men and just talk about adulthood, talk about
Yeah.
careers, talk about how to make it out in the world, how
Mhm.
to, how to date, how to treat women. I
Well,
mean, there's
and
so many different
just
things.
right, right. Just see what's out there too. I mean, as far as the career paths, I
Mhm.
thought that was just brilliant.
Yeah, yeah,
That
worked great.
they discovered career paths, these high school kids
They
that
had no idea we're out
they
there.
wouldn't even have known about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Well, and I think, adding on to that, I think as you do that, as you become a kind of a, yeah, moral guide, or in a way, not fully, but you're helping. Don't get into the weeds, guys. Don't if you're going to go hang out, you try to help someone become something. Don't get into flat earth or whatever. I
Oh
mean,
my, yeah.
don't
Oh
even. And
gracious.
I think you can help someone understand the basics. Help someone understand civics, or
Mhm.
economy, rather than talking about the down the rabbit hole of Donald Trump. That's just my
seriously.
Yeah.
two cents. They don't need that. Let them form their own opinions on that, but let them help them understand civics or economics, something like give them the basic foundations, help them learn that, help them understand maybe even how to balance a checkbook, whatever it is, especially if you know they're from a single mother family. But don't try to teach them your worldview, that because your worldview might sometimes be pretty stupid. Speaking for myself as well. All right, let's keep moving on. Here's a question, and this is a touchy one. It's a tough one. Thoughts on sending your kids to Catholic school versus homeschooling? I'll let you guys take this tough one.
It's very situational.
It's a tough one, and I'll tell you the story that when we first met, I think it was Reverend Mother. It was one of the sisters up here, and told her that we were homeschoolers. She's like, "Oh no!" And literally thought that it was a terrible thing. And we're like, "Well, wait a minute. We've been homeschoolers, and we did great. All the other homeschoolers we know were great,
the smartest people we knew.
Smartest people we knew. And so what was the divide here? But what we found out, and we have found out over the course of the years,
it's a sad fact.
It's a sad fact that homeschool, it's a little bit like a baseball player swinging for the fences. Sometimes you're going to hit a home run, but boy, there's a lot of strikeouts that happen.
Yeah.
And
the homeschoolers that a lot of the sisters see in the traditional Catholic schools are the failed homeschoolers. Right. And that's why they're in the traditional Catholic schools. It's in my opinion, anybody can be a homeschooler, but you have to be extraordinarily committed.
Yeah.
You have to decide that your life is going to be about learning. Now, does this mean that you're going to go from 8 until 5 o'clock every day, or 8 to 3, rather, I should say, not 5, 8 to 3 o'clock every day, and do a conventional schooling? No, because you'll kill yourself. You will go screaming into the night. Don't even try that. But can you make your home a learning home?
If you yourself only feel like you have a 6th grade capacity for education, that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, you have to want it. You have to really want it that badly. You have to want to do it. You have to figure it out. You have to make it something. You have to make your children learners. And that's really all we did, because we had some pretty goofed up years, because I was on bed rest with some pregnancies, and there were some years it's like, did we do school that year? I don't even remember it.
But we did also have a couple of years where we sent the kids to private schools.
Right. And we did. Yeah. When they were available, there were a couple times we did. And that was a wonderful thing, but it was also, there were a lot of downsides to it too. Right. I was not used to my children being influenced by other kids. I just wasn't used to it. I sent my kindergartner and my 1st grade to school, and they came back different people the first time we ever did this. And everybody was appalled.
Yeah.
They're like,
I came home to visit, and I was like, what happened to you? Oh, I couldn't even stand him.
I know. Yeah. They were talking differently. They were moving differently.
They're laughing unnaturally.
Oh, it was weird.
And at weird things.
Yeah. And something they picked up from the children in the school.
Right.
And no, sorry, you're coming back home.
But the influence, and I would be very careful about private schools that have secular, non-religious teachers. I mean, we're not big fans. It can work, but we're not big fans of that. But I think where you have sisters doing the teaching, you're gonna. I mean, the sisters almost without exception are always fantastic, phenomenal. Well, they're a great example. They care.
They really care.
I mean, I can't say enough good about the sisters that have, helped.
And there are some wonderful secular teachers too, but we've also seen situations where they're more secular than there were sisters, and it just doesn't work out real well all the time. I mean, sometimes you can have little tiny family chapels that have little tiny family schools, and that's a whole other thing too. But it's very much a personal decision. Is one better than the other? For some people, yes.
Yeah.
For some people, homeschooling is better. For some people, it's just homeschooling just doesn't work. For mom's emotional ability, for just time. Sometimes there are physical problems. Sometimes you just have many children in a row. That's kind of hard. I'm the first to say that is actually kind of hard. And if you've got a traditional school nearby, I don't think there's anything wrong at all
There's
with
nothing wrong. Yeah,
try it.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, try it. You trust the teachers.
In
Yeah,
a lot of schools, you're going to get mass every day, or at least you're going to get
that's the
rosary, and
best
that's a
thing you can
that's
get.
a big one
Right.
that you can't get. You can't get at home, and
As you're homeschooling.
you can have morning prayers, and you can have a family rosary.
Unless you
and
live really
whatnot.
close.
Right.
We do.
But I mean, so there are some benefits of school, and yeah, I mean, maybe try both and see which one works. But I don't think that, if you if you try homeschool even and send your children to a private school, I don't feel like you're a failure.
Oh, no.
Because I think every situation is different.
Oh yeah. And if your kid absolutely hates one or the other, you're going to have another problem. I mean,
Mhm.
if they absolutely hate homeschooling, then yeah, you might as well send them to the if you've got a good traditional school. If you have no other option, they're going to have to learn to live with it, because you're better off putting them in a closet than putting them in a public school. My personal opinion. But yeah.
I had an opinion on that, and now it's gone. It's
Do you have it
it's
anymore?
it's
So
4
early.
a.m. to me. It's 4 a.m. to me. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. I think that was really the last question. I mean, if anyone else still has questions, I think we're gonna go maybe just a couple more minutes. I would ask again, everyone, if you're interested for more shows like this. I'm thinking as we're going, because that's how my brain works. I'm kind of half paying attention, half thinking about something else. That maybe we do this again, and maybe sometime we do it with the two of you and with maybe Father Philip or Sister Antonia. I think that'd be pretty cool too. That add another layer to perhaps answering questions, because that obviously the priests and the nuns, they don't literally raise children, but they definitely come into plenty of different issues and different aspects of childhood and mentorship and teaching, etc., which I think would be pretty good to get there.
And they're going to be better than we are at teaching the will of the church, and
Right.
and that's a whole dynamic that you just can't get from somebody who's not religious.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So if anyone else has any questions, please let us know. And please, while we're at it, like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. We want to, get out good material to people as much as we can. I know we're kind of slow on content these days. That's how the channel kind of runs. We go hot and cold. Usually because of me. I also have 3 little children. It makes it, a little tough sometimes. But in the summer too, I think it's just not as there's just a lot going on and not as much time to spend indoors podcasting. But again, if everyone could like and all that stuff. If you're not watching live after this is published, please give us your comments as well. We'd love to hear your questions. Perhaps it's something, if you comment on this, we could answer your questions in a future podcast as well. Again, so let us know if you guys like this type of show.
Speaking of which, yeah, you got a really good question.
Got a really good question.
We can probably start tonight, but I think this one
we've handled these questions before on church related ones.
Right, but we'll go ahead and maybe get started on an answer and maybe save a fuller answer for another night. But the one on disciplining misbehaved children in church, the number one, church mass needs to be something that over the course of time is one of the highlights of their week. We talk about joyful associations. There is no more important joyful association than mass and then church. And even as a 6-month-old or a 1-year-old, they can't appreciate mass, but they can smell that, they can hear the bells, they can smell the incense, they can kind of get a little bit of a feel for how that's going. But this was something that Lisa was particularly good at. If we had a misbehaving child in church, 2, 3, 4 years old, maybe at the most, take them out and walk them around.
Don't yell at them.
Don't yell at them. Try to make
if they're really little, they're not going to remember what you're yelling at them for. They're just going to remember that they went to church and got yelled at.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but Lisa was really good. We were at a church where there was a long hallway downstairs with a lot of different pictures in the hallway, and Lisa would just go from picture to picture to picture and talk about the pictures, and that distracted them. and got. And I'll give you one other real quick piece of advice that we took. We lived close to church for a time, and when the child turned 3-year-old.
No,
Well, four was when we remember 4 was the big year.
The big year.
Yeah. So 3 years old, they didn't know how to behave in mass, and you think about sitting at home for an hour and holding a 3-year-old in your lap and doing nothing. Right? They're not going to behave.
Be quiet
there either. So it's not church. They don't know. But
you can start training them though. A big part of misbehaved children during mass is that they aren't forced to behave during the week. I mean, you have to train them to behave and to listen to you during the week, so that all you have to do is look at them. You give them the mom eye. You give them the mom eye, they know what that means. They stop. And that's something you do all week long. And you teach them to sit still. You read to them. You make them sit still. So there are periods during the day where they are literally just sitting
still.
If they never ever sit still, you're not going to get them to sit still during mass. I mean, so a lot of the training does begin at home. But there are also things that you can do during mass that you don't want them to hate being in Jesus's house.
The little head. Oh, go ahead.
Use your language. Use your words. Call it Jesus's house. Don't say we have to go to church. Say we get to go to Jesus's house this morning, and praise them up one side and down the other. If they're being good, even if they're being good for a minute, smile at them during mass. I mean, you don't want them to get the idea that you're there to entertain them in any way, shape, or form. But if you notice they're being good, you reach over and you pat them on the back and you smile at them so that they know that you see them being good. Most children want to make you happy with them.
Right.
That's natural. It's a natural instinct. They want you to be happy with them. But you catch them being good. When they're misbehaving, you take them straight out. Now, there are those few times when you might have to swat a butt. If you've got a child who's over 4 years of age, now I know that the church tells you, and that's true, that the age of reason is around 7. By 4, they know.
They kind of know.
They know when they're just being bad. They know. If you have a 4, 5, 6-year-old who is just misbehaving, they might have to get a swat, but I think I would make it separate. I wouldn't take them out immediately and swat them.
Well, and I'll tell you what. And what really works is the donuts. If you've got donuts, I'll tell you what, boy.
Yep.
We've seen a couple all about the donuts, because you get a 4-year-old and they get that donut every week, and then they're bad and they don't get the donut, and that it's more meaningful to them. I mean, their whole countenance and they know that they deserve not to have the donut.
Right. Well, and the disappointment adds to the shame. Shame adds to the disappointment. And they do learn. I hate to say it, but bribery will get you places, and not just in mass.
But the little head game that we played, and not many people are able to do this, is we lived real close to our church, and we had 2 masses, 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock. And we would get a 3-year-old, and 3-year-old would get a little rambunctious. We would keep 3-year-old home and not let them go to mass.
Right. We would switch off.
Right. And then when they hit 4, they had the big birthday celebration, and big deal because you're a big boy, you're a big girl.
You get your own little kid missile.
Your own little kid missile, and you get to go. You're a big kid now. You get to go to mass every week, and now it was a big deal, and you could turn it into a positive. That and a lot of them will take that to heart. I'm 4 years old now. I'm a big kid, so I'm going to behave in mass because I'm a big kid.
Yeah, and then praise them when they do. And it's amazing how far a little praise will go too. Not just punishment. Sometimes they have to be punished. The donut has to be taken away, but yeah.
And I think I remember from a former podcast, Mom, you had really good practical advice to sit behind your children, not beside them.
Oh yeah,
which I think is
line them up.
Which is pretty smart. They line them up in front of you, so you have a bunch of them. Because exactly. Because if you're behind them, you get that perfect view.
Yep.
And then
you can reach.
You get that finger in the back of your.
Yeah. No, it's true. Especially if you're by yourself, moms. If you're by yourself and you've got 4 or 5 kids, you give it up. But if you're right behind them, you are in control, and they know you're behind them too. So yeah. This is why that's why the sisters do that,
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. They go and sit behind what the kindergartners and first graders, at least in Omaha, remember that exactly. So They see all. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. We thank everyone for their very nice comments. It looks like everyone enjoyed the show. Mom and Dad, thank you very much for doing this. I know you guys are getting pretty late there, very late there, definitely past your bedtimes. I got to get going here to work pretty soon. But we appreciate everyone in the comment section. Thank you guys for your questions. That was awesome. And I think I'd love to do it again sometime. Everyone, let us know. Let us know what times would work for you guys, because that really is that's the struggle. It's like I can do 8 o'clock. Sometimes these guys can do, say, 2 p.m. on a Saturday or a Friday or a Sunday, or we could do 5 p.m. Central Time, or we could do something like tonight again, which was what, 9 p.m. Central.
This was 9 p.m. Central. It's
right?
Hard for me to do earlier than 6, at least consistently. I might be able to pull off 5 p.m. every so often, just for work. I usually don't get off until closer to 5. So, but I know 6 gets miserable for you, because that's like 1 a.m.
Yeah, 1 a.m. is about
you, and
then I don't sleep at all. Yeah.
No, you don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But it seems like weekends might be a good option too, though. It opens it up for everybody,
right?
And not just us.
Yeah. Let us know
go
in the
ahead
comments.
And leave comments. Leave some comments and let us know what works for everybody.
Awesome. Cool. Well, everyone, thank you. Mom and Dad, again, thank you very much for doing this, for staying up and taking the questions. And I think it went well, and hopefully we will do it again sometime. And if anyone else has any personal questions, you want to get in touch with Mom or Dad, I don't know if you guys want to give an email address or a Twitter handle, or if they should contact me. How do you guys want to do that? I didn't ask you guys that before.
Go ahead and just leave comments in the YouTube. Or Kevin89Davis@gmail.com. That's yours. I could put ours out there, but I don't.
We don't check it.
We're not real good about checking email. I think we check comments here, or yours better. But I mean, try to get a hold of us, and if you try once or twice, keep trying, because we will get back with you. But we're not particularly good at monitoring the comments either.
Yeah, you can email me at popesandpipes@gmail.com. That's a better email now that Kevin89Davis is getting full. Gmail wants me to pay for a monthly subscription because I filled up my email. I'm like, I'm not going to pay. I use Google. I'm certainly not going to pay Google. So the better email these days is popesandpipes@gmail.com. Fully spelled out, popesandpipes@gmail.com. If you send it to Kevin89Davis, I should probably still get it, but it is slowly filling up to a point where it's like, I don't know. I guess I can go through and just delete all the old emails, but ain't nobody got time for that. As you see, Dad's email address.
There's mine.
Davis.amdg@gmail.
It's a little bit of a mouthful.
It is. I always forget it. I have to look it up every single time. Perfect. Then everybody have a great day, evening, morning if you're in Australia, or I guess no, they're midday in Australia, morning here in Germany.